The gates of Willowbrook State School loomed tall and foreboding, casting long shadows over the crumbling pathways that led inside. For many, it was a place shrouded in whispers, a dark secret tucked away from the prying eyes of the world. But for Julia Evans, it was a daily reality. As a nurse within its walls, she had seen more than her fair share of suffering, but nothing could have prepared her for the horrors she was about to uncover. Willowbrook housed hundreds of children with intellectual disabilities, many abandoned by families who could no longer care for them or simply didn't want to. The institution was overcrowded, understaffed, and in constant disrepair. But despite the grim conditions, Julia did her best to bring a little light into the children's lives. It was during one of her late-night shifts that Julia first began to notice something was amiss. A new batch of children had recently been admitted, their small faces pale and their bodies frail. It wasn't unusual for the newcomers to be weak. Many arrived malnourished or sick, but these children seemed different. They grew sicker with each passing day, their skin yellowing, their eyes dulling. Julia's concern deepened as she observed the pattern. The children were falling ill too quickly, too uniformly, and always, it seemed, after a visit from Dr. Saul Krugman. Dr. Kruger was a man of quiet authority, respected by his peers for his knowledge and unwavering dedication to his work. He was leading a study designed to understand the hepatitis virus's development and evaluate the effectiveness of gamma globulin injections as a protective measure against the disease. But there was something about him that made Julia uneasy. He was too detached, too clinical, as if the children were mere subjects in a laboratory rather than vulnerable human beings. One night, unable to shake her suspicions, Julia decided to investigate. The thought of going through the medical records without permission filled her with dread, but the image of the sick children spurred her on. She had to know what was happening to them. The records room was a small, stuffy space crammed with dusty files and outdated equipment. Julia's heart pounded as she rifled through the cabinets, searching for anything that could explain the sudden wave of illness. Finally, she found it, a file labeled Hepatitis Study, Confidential. Her hands trembled as she opened the folder. The words on the pages seemed to blur before her eyes, but as she forced herself to focus, the horrifying truth became clear. The children were not merely victims of circumstance, they were being deliberately infected with hepatitis. Julia felt the room spin around her. She couldn't believe what she was reading. Dr. Kruger and his team were conducting experiments on the children, injecting them with the virus under the guise of research. They argued that the children were likely to contract hepatitis anyway, due to the institution's unsanitary conditions. So why not study the disease's progression in a controlled manner? The cold clinical justifications made Julia sick to her stomach. The children were being sacrificed on the altar of science, their pain and suffering deemed acceptable collateral in the pursuit of knowledge. As she stood there clutching the damning evidence, the door creaked open behind her. Julia spun around to see Dr. Krugman standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable.
Ah, Nurse Evans,
He said, his voice calm.
I see you found our exclusive study.
How could you do this? These are children, not lab rats. They trust us to care for them, and you're killing them.
Dr. Krugman stepped closer, his gaze unwavering.
I am doing what must be done for the greater good. This research could save countless lives in the future. Don't you get it?
The study involved knowingly infecting children with hepatitis, often using feces-contaminated food like chocolate milk to observe their immune responses.
It's a sacrifice, yes, but a necessary one, and one I'm willing to make.
What sacrifice have you made? Oh yeah, you sacrificed the future of these kids to get your name on a magazine?
Julia spat the word.
There's nothing necessary about this. It's monstrous.
For a moment, the two stood in silence, the weight of their words hanging heavily in the air.
You should leave this alone, Nurse Evans.
Dr. Krugman finally said, his tone almost fatherly.
Think of your career, your future.
Exposing this will destroy everything you've worked for.
Do you really want to be the one responsible for that?
Dr. Krugman and his separated the infected children from the general population, housing them in cleaner facilities to minimize exposure to other infections. They were thoroughly monitored and cared for throughout the process. But that did little to ease Julia's horror. She wouldn't stay silent. The children deserve better. The days that followed were a blur of fear and determination. Julia gathered as much evidence as she could, documenting the study, the infected children, and Dr. Krugman's notes. Then, with trembling hands, she contacted a journalist known for exposing corruption and unethical practices. When the story broke, it was like a bomb going off. The public was outraged, the media relentless in their coverage of the Willowbrook scandal. Legal investigations were launched. Investigative reports from Willowbrook State School reveal a horrifying picture of systemic neglect and abuse. The facility, severely overcrowded, housed thousands more residents than its intended capacity. This overcrowding led to deplorable living conditions, with basic sanitation ignored and disease running rampant. Sources within Willowbrook describe a culture of unchecked abuse, both physical and emotional. Residents, many with severe intellectual disabilities, were left vulnerable and without recourse. Medical care was minimal, and cries for help often went unanswered. Most shockingly, Willowbrook became infamous for conducting unethical medical experiments on its residents, including the deliberate infection of children with hepatitis in an attempt to study the disease and develop a vaccine. These experiments were carried out without proper informed consent, raising serious ethical concerns. The reports paint a bleak picture of a facility where basic human dignity was routinely denied. Willowbrook stands as a chilling testament to the consequences of institutional neglect and the urgent need for reform. And the hepatitis experiments were immediately halted. The institution's dirty secrets were laid bare for the world to see, and Willowbrook's reputation was irreparably damaged. Julia was dismissed from her position, ostracized by colleagues who either didn't believe her or were too afraid to support her. She became a pariah, her career in nursing effectively over. But as she stood outside the gates of Willowbrook for the last time, she felt a strange sense of peace. The school's long shadows no longer frightened her. She had faced the darkness and brought the truth to light, and in that she found a strength she never knew she had. The children were gone now, many transferred to better facilities or taken in by families, horrified by what had happened. Willowbrook would close its doors years later, the institution left to rot as a monument to a shameful past. But Julia knew that the real legacy of Willowbrook was not in its walls or its scandal, but in the lives of the children she had fought to protect. Their suffering would not be in vain. The world had seen what happened in the shadows, and it would never forget.